the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for
And we
country.
are back on a lovely, presumably Wednesday day. Glad to rejoin y'all. Taylor's going to be giving us a incredible story to remember as she finishes yawning.
You can tell it's going to be so good.
It's going to be so good. She's already
What are
yawning.
you on again?
We are doomed to fail. I'm Fars, joined here by Taylor. This week I covered the Olympic class ships that were doomed to fail, and now Taylor is going to give us some teasers into what she's covering.
Great. So, Fars, have you seen the news this week?
I mean, that is a pretty broad state question. I mean, which part of the news? March
Did you
Madness? Or
No, not that. Did you notice that we found a British woman that was missing?
what? No.
We found Kate Middleton. Did you see where she was?
I did, and now I feel a little bad for some of the cracks we made about her husband and life.
I'm on the fence. So yes, I feel bad because she has cancer and that's horrible, and I hope she's okay. But they should have told us. Like they shouldn't have been weird about it, and they should do better at publicity instead of doing those weird things and letting people go crazy and think about things. There was an article in the Daily Mail, so you know that it's like the peak of journalism. But the headline was, "The Archbishop of Canterbury says Kate Middleton conspiracy theories are nothing more than old-fashioned village gossip," which made me laugh for 7 hours because that headline could have been a headline for the past 1,427 years, because that's how long the Archbishop of Canterbury has been a job. That article, the headline is so funny. Of course it's village gossip. What do you expect us to do? We're living in the middle of history. Don't you think people were talking about it when Henry VIII and his wives kept getting their heads chopped off? Of course.
I think you got to say something.
Yeah, and I felt a little bit of sympathy towards Meghan Markle because she was pregnant. It did come out that she was suicidal and all these things, and they were so mean to her, and made her do all these things. And then I remembered that my favorite gossip about Meghan Markle is that when she had that podcast, that she didn't actually do the interviews. She would just say the things that the interviewer said later, and they'd re-record it, which makes me laugh really hard. And I'm gonna love this gossip forever.
Wait, she read what?
The gossip about the Meghan Markle podcast that was canceled after the first season is that someone else would do the interview and then she would re-record the interviewer talking. So she wouldn't really do the interview.
Is that true?
I don't know, but remember when the CEO of Spotify called her a grifter because her podcast was so bad?
Oh,
So
yeah, I do.
all that's fun. And it's fun because there's a lot of bad things happening in the world, so it's fun that to have a thing to talk about in the royal family that you're, in the able to be there. But I hope Kate gets better. Obviously, sounds like she will. But I want to, because we're still in Women's History Month, talk about the best-selling fiction author of all time. They're only tied with William Shakespeare. So some places say that this person and William Shakespeare have both sold from 2 billion to 4 billion copies of their work. Guinness Book of World Records says that it's her. So she is definitely the highest-selling woman author of all time, and probably the highest-selling fiction author of all time as well. Do you know who we might be talking about?
First off, how on earth would they, if your guessing range is $2 billion off or 2 billion units off, then you're just making something up then, right? I mean,
1,000%. The third person on the list, their number is 500 million. So these two are definitely the two winners, but you're right that range is crazy.
Who could it be? The 50 Shades of Grey woman?
Well, but I'm sure she's on the list. No, it's a British woman who wrote mystery novels in the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s. They are movies that are still being made today about her books. And one of her greatest characters is I apologize to Nadine, our friend from French Canada who asked us to run pronunciation by her. But the Hercule Poirot is one of her um, best known characters. Do you know who that is?
I no clue.
Anyway, it's Agatha Christie.
Okay,
So, um,
I have heard of Agatha Christie.
okay, cool. So let's talk a
Is
little bit
she
about
is she the Pride and Prejudice person?
absolutely not. No, that is Jane Austen. That's from a very, very long time ago.
Let's just move past this.
Okay. Um, so you're so funny. Um, no, Pride and Prejudice was when was oh, it was published in 1813. We're like 100 years later.
Got it. Got it.
So in Agatha Christie's lifetime, she wrote 66 novels and 14 short story collections. Her play, The Mousetrap, ran it's the longest running play in history. It ran from 1952 until it had to close for COVID, and now it's open again. But before it closed for COVID, it had 27,500 performances in London.
Wow.
So it's still they're going to be there forever. She was named a dame by the Queen, by Queen Elizabeth. I'll talk about what that means a little bit later. She has a million awards, but her book, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, has been voted the best crime novel by the Crime Writers Association. And I did very much gasp at the twist in that book when I read it, because I did read a bunch of the Poirot books during COVID as well. So they're great. They're really fun. They're just like a fun classic mystery story. Um, some of her, just to note that I know, some of her works do have some very old-fashioned racist terms that have been removed recently. The book "And Then There Were None" had two revisions on the title. So if you know, you know, you don't have to look it up. It was not good. But I also have a question about the blood splatter at the end of that novel. So if you also want to talk about that, please let me know.
Have
Because
you read all these?
I've read a bunch of them.
Wow. All right.
I think I read like the first 10 or so of the Poirot ones, and then I definitely read And Then There Were None, and I mean, they're just fun to read, like they're supposed to be. They're mysteries. Um, so Agatha was born, Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller on 15th of September, 1890 in Devon, England. Her family was pretty well off. They were like, they were not poor. Her parents met because her mom's name was Clara. Clara's dad died, and her Aunt Margaret offered to take Clara in when she was 9. So Clara goes to live with her aunt when she's 9. Her aunt lives with a man that she's married to named Nathaniel Frey Miller. Miller had a 17-year-old son, um, and that ends up being Agatha's dad. So her parents, like, they were not related, but they grew up in the same household. But they didn't get married till the mom was 22. But like, they were like they're like not step siblings, but like a step niece, cousins, potentially. They weren't related.
This
That's what they
this
meant.
title's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. Yeah. You know, it's pretty bad. It's very bad. If you looked it up, it's bad.
Oh my God.
hmm hmm Um, but so those are Agatha's parents. They didn't marry until Clara was 22. They had 3 kids, and Agatha was the youngest. She was homeschooled until her father died when she was 11, and her mother sent her to school in Paris, which, like, just if you get sent to a boarding school in Paris, something cool is going to happen to you. I just feel like either you're just like, I don't know, it just sounds super fun. Like one of the people that I really like in history is a woman named Diana Vreeland, who I'm sure I've talked to her about her before. She was an editor of Vogue, just like a really eccentric, fun woman. And when someone asked her for her life and advice, she said, "First off, you must arrange to be born in Paris." Which I think is so funny, like it's something that she would say. It's like growing up in Paris sounds pretty fun, especially in like in 1900. Um, she would go travel with her mother. Her mother was sick, so they went to Cairo for a change of air. So spent a lot of time doing like very British things in the Middle East, like going to balls and polo and social things. But they were, there for a while. Then they went back to the UK, and Agatha met a member of the British Royal Artillery Force, Archibald Christie. She met him at a fancy party. They got married in 1914, and then he was sent to France for World War One. During World War One, Agatha was a nurse for the Red Cross. There, she became an apothecary's assistant, which sounds way more fun than being like a pharmacist, uh, right?
I mean, what does an apothecary do? Make
A pharmacist
spices?
is the same thing,
Oh,
that
got it.
pharmacist. But because that, she learned about poison because it still wasn't like medicine like we have today. It was like little concoctions and stuff. So she learned a lot about that, and she would use those stories, like how to use different poisons in her books later, which is fun. She always liked writing and she always liked reading. Okay, her first novel was rejected 6 times, and then she found her second novel she found success with. It's called The Affair at Styles, which is the first Hercule Poirot book. So that's the name. And who he is a character of hers who is a Belgian police officer. And he's like retired, but like not really retired, and keeps getting into all these like shenanigans, and it's fun. If you want to picture what this character looks like, the person who played him on TV for the longest time was named David Suchet. And he is the person who played the French guy who was trying to find Bigfoot in Harry and the Hendersons. Can you picture that person? That's a deep
I'm
one,
gonna.
but
I can't picture. In my mind, for some reason, I pictured Steve Martin.
it's a little bit like Steve Martin in the Pink Panther. I think
Yeah,
that's like a
that's what I was
parody.
thinking.
Yeah, that's like a parody of it. That's not it, but it's a parody of it for sure. Because it's like a little mustache and like he has like a French accent and he's kind of funny. You know,
Right, right.
exactly. Um, it was a bit slow going, but by 1923, she was selling books like crazy and everyone loved it. So she was getting really, really popular. She had a lot of money. She's a little bit stingy with it. Like she didn't flaunt her wealth, but she definitely was making a lot of money. And in 1919, she had her only child, Rosalind. So she's definitely like happy with her husband, selling books. Things are going really well. In 1922, Agatha traveled the world on a promotional tour for a thing called the British Empire Exhibition, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a World's Fair, but just for the colonies of Britain, and to like show the colonies each other and look how cool we are and look how many cool things we've done for you. You're welcome. And one
Lovely.
thing that they did, yeah, like of course they did. And one thing they did is they went to Hawaii. And so she learned how to surf, which is kind of fun because that was in like the 1920s. When they got back, oh, that tour was run by a man named Ernest Belcher. So he'll come back in just a second. So later, the exhibition had like a semi-permanent spot for a year in London. The official aim was, quote, to stimulate trade, strengthen bonds that bind mother country to her sister states and daughters, to bring into closer contact the one with each other, to enable all who owe allegiance to the British flag to meet on common ground and learn to know each other, which is ridiculous. I mean,
It's noble
ridiculous.
but unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So just like a World's Fair just for them. I just added that in there because they built a stadium to have the exhibition in, and that stadium is now called Wembley Stadium. So that's where
Oh,
that
fun.
came from, which is cool. So now it's 1926. So she's just been on that tour. She's writing. She's very successful. Agatha's mom dies in April, and she's super sad. In August of 1926, Archie asks for a divorce. While they were on that tour, he met a friend of Belcher, the person who was in charge of the tour, named Nancy Neal, and he fell in love with her and he wanted to get married. So he asked Agatha for a divorce, and she was unamused, as you can imagine. They didn't get divorced right away, but a couple months later, on December 3rd, 1926, this is when Agatha Christie disappears for 11 days and no one knew where she was, and she claims to not remember it at all. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of what happened, what people think happened, and then some of the amazing tabloid journalism that sounds exactly what it sounded like when Kate Middleton was missing. Uh,
It
So
all dovetails. It all comes
we are,
together.
we are the same people we've always been, is definitely the answer. So on December 3rd, 1926, they were still living together in Berkshire. I don't know, whatever, in England. He went out for the night and she was mad. And this is the part where like you would see Instagram reels of people trying to find her, figure out where she was, all the things. So here's what happened, and it's probably none of anyone's business, but it is our business because it was in the tabloids and now we can talk about it. But around 9:30 p.m. on December 3rd, Agatha kissed Rosalind, their daughter, goodnight. Rosalind was 7. She got into her Morris Cowley car, which, if you look that up, it's a cool car because it's 1926.
Morris?
Uh-huh,
Morris Cowley.
the 1926 one.
Oh my God,
It's
that's so
cool.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know how much money she was making in the 1920s, but by the 1950s, she's making in our money today about £2.5 million a year. So she's making good money. But so she leaves her house at 9:30. She disappears for 11 days. More than 1,000 police officers were involved. It was the first airplane search in the United Kingdom. The police asked Arthur Conan Doyle and Dorothy Sayers, both mystery novel writers, to help. Um, and here's this kind of the play-by-play of what happened. Her car was found on day one on a steep slope, kind of overhanging a quarry. So it's speculated that she got in a crash right away. This crash is close to where she lived, and they found her car and it had some like papers in it and some clothing. Right away, people had ideas. This place where she crashed was near a lake called the Silent Pool, which was like a lake that was supposed to have no bottom where people had drowned before. So they were like, did she try to drown herself? Did her husband kill her to marry Nancy? And that's stuff the police knew, but the public didn't know about the affair until later, but Agatha definitely did. So they were like, did she potentially, die by suicide because she didn't want the embarrassment or she didn't want her husband to leave? Was it a publicity stunt just to get like more views of her books, to get more things sold. Like, could that be what it was? Um, there was a quote I read on a website called History Extra, where they say, quote, Arthur Conan Doyle, a keen occultist, tried using paranormal powers to solve the mystery. He took one of Christie's gloves to a celebrated medium in the hope that it would provide answers. It did not, which is hilarious. And can you imagine?
Can
Um,
I can
so
I propose my theory, or are we not?
uh, we're not there yet.
No, keep going. All right, keep
Yeah.
going.
So so like that's hilarious that like in the paper you're hearing that like Arthur Conan Doyle is like calling a psychic to try to find out where she is. The New York Times has an awesome kind of play-by-play of how the New York Times um uh, published about this story. So on the front page of the New York Times, like by the next day, it said Mrs. Agatha Christie, novelist, disappears in a strange way from her home in England. So like we're exactly the same, trying to find her. Everyone's trying to figure out what it is. On December 8th, so 2 days later, they called off the search. Her brother-in-law said that he had heard from her and she was fine. So they were like, okay, maybe she's fine. Maybe it's no big deal. She just like walked away for a little bit. On December 10th, the police were like, man, we don't buy that. We haven't been able to find her. So they started the search over again. It's a December 10th, 1926 article in the New York Times. It is next to an ad for fur coats, which is pretty fun. And it mentioned that they brought her dog into the search. And one of the other things that they theorized was that she left because her house was haunted and that she had apparently told a friend, quote, it stands on a lonely lane unlit at night, which has a reputation of being haunted. The lane has been the scene of a murder of a woman and the suicide of a man. If I do not leave Sunningdale soon, Sunningdale will be the end of me. So like
Wow.
that's ridiculous, but that was the paper. People were like, that was the New York Times. Like, could that be why she left? Could that be what happened? On December 12th, the New York Times said, quote, without telling why, the police still believe that she is somewhere on the downs, not far from the spot where her missing automobile was found. So they're like, now they think she's dead.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, I love this. It's like a fun mystery. Like, where could she possibly be? She apparently wrote 3 letters somehow. People are like, oh, we found 3 letters from her. Were they important? Was it a suicide note? Was it a note to her husband? What could it be? Her secretary said, quote, Mrs. Christie is too much of a lady for that, to say that like she was doing it for publicity or that the note said anything. She said it was just like a regular note that she would give her. Police speculated that she was in London dressed as a man, which I also imagine nowadays there'd be like that grainy cell phone video of like a dude that kind of looks like Agatha Christie, you know, just like there
Yeah.
was of Kate at the farmer's market. So um, they said that they found a letter that she said only open after my body is found, but like that wasn't true. There was a seance held around where her car crashed, and they said that it was foul play. So like all these people are getting involved, obviously, making it their story, just like making shit up, using rumors, like doing things. But eventually what was one more thing? Oh, on December 14th, the New York Times said, quote, a bottle labeled poison, lead and opium, fragments of a torn up postcard, a woman's fur-lined coat, a box of face powder, the end of a loaf of bread, a cardboard box, and 2 children's books were found in the car. Which is just like so funny. They're just like every, that could mean anything. They also say, quote, the police have information which they refuse to divulge, which leads them to the view that Mrs. Christie had no intention of returning when she left home. So it's all speculation, all rumors, and it's just like in papers around the world. Um, Eventually, Agatha Christie was found at a spa at a nice hotel called the Swan Hydro in Harrogate. She had no luggage. She allegedly didn't know who she was, but she checked in using the name Teresa Neal, which is the full name of her husband's mistress, Nancy Neal. So like
Oh wow.
cheeky. Eventually, the hotel's banjo player, Bob Tappan, recognized her and called the police. She said that she didn't know who she was. She didn't know how she got there. She hadn't recognized herself in the paper because she was obviously on like the front page of the paper in England, and like no one recognized her. Like no one knew it was her. So like that's like part of the mystery, but also like they probably just weren't saying that they knew that she was. They're like, you can stay here. But one report I read said that when her husband came into the hotel, he sat at a table and watched her walk in, and he saw her walk in, pick up a paper with her picture on it, and put it down, and she acted like she didn't know him when she saw him, which is hilarious, 'cause she was
I
mad
mean,
at him.
yeah,
Um,
my take on it is like sometimes you just want to get away from everything. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
how many times you hear about like someone like a celebrity going to like that Malibu resort that does
right,
like detox, and it's like they probably just wanted to just chill for a little bit, like just get away and have an excuse to get away from everyone.
100%. I think it's 100% what happened. One more thing that is very similar to right now is that Nancy, the mistress, her dad said in the New York Times, quote, I cannot hazard any theory why Mrs. Christie should have used my family's name. He is quoted as saying, quote, my daughter Nancy is naturally upset about it, and so are we all. There is not the slightest reason for associating Nancy with the disappearance of Mrs. Christie, which we know is not true because we know that she is the mistress of Agatha's husband. And again, that's just like unbelievable because I also saw on Instagram today that Lady Rose Hanbury, the alleged mistress of Prince William, is suing Stephen Colbert.
I mean, yeah, I would.
Or I mean, I still think that she did it, but like, it's just exactly the same thing that is happening then and will happen forever. We're like, we don't know anything, so we're just gonna speculate and speculate for these people who are like in the news, like they're famous people. Um, Agatha never talked about what happened. She said maybe in the Daily Mail that she tried to drive into the quarry, but the car got stuck and she hit her head on the steering wheel and got a little bit of like amnesia. Maybe that is what happened. But most likely she was just pissed and went away,
Yeah,
which is totally fair.
it's most obvious, like literally, it's the most obvious answer. Like,
Exactly. It's like with Kate Middleton, the most obvious answer was that she was too sick to tell us anything, but we were like, what could it be? You know. Because we don't
yeah,
know. Who doesn't love mystery? No one. Everyone loves mystery. Especially a mystery writer who's missing. Like, that's fun, you know?
yeah.
So 15 months later, on March 16th, 1928, Agatha filed for divorce. Once they were divorced, Archie married Nancy a week later. Like, of course he did. Agatha got the kid. In 1928, she went on a trip on the Orient Express, as you know, because she wrote Murder on the Orient Express, which you
Yep,
may have heard of.
that I have heard
And
of.
Yep. While she was there, she met an archaeologist who introduced her to another archaeologist named Max Malawan in Iraq. So they were in Iraq on like a dig. He was 13 years younger than her. They got married 2 years later in 1930, and they were married until her death in 1976. They did archaeology travels together around the world. During World War II, she went back to the UK to do more pharmacy work. There was a part where MI5 thought that she was actually a spy because the stuff that she was writing was like lining up with what was happening. But like it turned out, obviously, like she was not, but they were just like nervous and suspicious. But also during World War II, she went back to her old job as a pharmacy tech, essentially, and helped with, during the war with that. In the 19, go ahead.
How do you just go do an archaeology dig?
I don't know, but I love it. And you know what it reminds me of? Have you ever seen the Royal Tenenbaums?
No.
It's obviously Wes Anderson. It's one of my absolute favorite movies. But like the husband and wife, it's Angelica Houston and Gene Hackman, and they get divorced. And then like the next scene, they go, Ethelene Tenenbaum became an archaeologist. I just love that so much. I'm like, oh, okay, great, good.
It's like the
Uh,
perfect job of like I just want to get away from everyone and
yeah.
have no questions asked.
Exactly, exactly. So fun. She used archaeology in a lot of her books. Then, like later, like they were like um, mysteries that involved like old things that people found, which is super exciting. In the 1970s, there was a crime in Britain about thallium poisoning, and they solved the crime because of her book and the way she described the effects of that poisoning. So she used a lot of her real life work as like in the pharmacy and in archaeology, like in her books as well. She would become a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, which is like an honorary thing for the arts. Her husband was also knighted for being an archaeologist, so she technically could be called Lady Malawan, but who wants to do that? Everybody wants to call her Agatha Christie. Um,
Right.
she died peacefully on January 12th, 1976, at the age of 85 at her house. Her daughter very carefully, took care of her legacy. There are tons of, obviously it's still very, very lucrative. So parts of her like, company and the Agatha Christie like Limited was, sold around. It's still being like bought by Netflix, bought by a bunch of like, big people to make movies out of it. They're all really, really fun. In her lifetime, she probably earned more than 100 million pounds in today's money. So she made a shit ton of money writing books and traveling the world. And then she had those 11 missing days that were speculated on, just the way we speculated on Kate Middleton those last 11 days 100 years ago.
I How old is her oldest book? 1921. I wouldn't be surprised if her stuff is entering the public domain now.
Oh yeah, it probably is.
Because I mean, I think 75 years is the cutoff for that.
Yeah, I
So,
think, let me see, The Affair. That's
which is
Giles.
why you ended up seeing all this explosion of like fun Frankenstein movies,
Hmm.
or like vampire stuff with like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer and like all this stuff is because that when this stuff enters the public domain, then you can just do other, yeah, like my recent horrible movie that I love, Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, I
Did you
didn't
see
watch
that
that
one?
yet. Mm-mm, but
It's
it
so
sounds really
stupid.
exciting.
It's very,
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
stupid. Like definitely don't watch it with your kids. It is like over
Oh
the
yeah,
top. It's like
totally.
hostile level gory. But that's because it went into the public domain, and so they could do it.
That's what is happening on John Oliver right now because Steamboat Willie, like the original Mickey Mouse, is in the public domain. So he like has it in all of his marketing and talks about it all the time.
John
Yeah.
Oliver?
Yeah. And he has like a guy dressed like Steamboat Willie like on his show all the time
No, I haven't
because
seen
he's
that.
in the public domain is really funny. But there are six Agatha Christie books in the public domain in the US and all the way up to The Murder of Roger Ackroyd from 1926. So you're right. There's a bunch of them.
Oh, um, fun.
Yeah,
I did not know that, and I made it very clear on this episode that I should probably read a lot more than I do because, yeah,
I'll read and I'll tell you about it.
if we could have that kind of friendship where you can just be my like literary.
That's literally what we're doing for us. I'm reading a book every week and telling you about it. We do have that
Well,
kind of
no,
friendship.
no, we don't because you're not telling me about like the books you wrote.
And I
We're
know,
not
but I'm
going.
but in this case I didn't read a book, but like for next week, I had something I was going to do today, but I'm moving it to next week because I wanted to do this today because of all of the missing British women in the news stuff. But I read a book and I'm going to tell you about it.
Okay,
I've read
okay.
so many books. They're on our Instagram. If you look at our Instagram stories, there's highlights of all the books that I've read in the past couple of years. I haven't added the books that you've read to it. If you want me to, let me know.
Thank you, Taylor. That's a
Um,
fun little dig.
hmm. But I've read a ton of books. That's all. That's the end of my story.
All right, we're proud of
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Maybe I'll watch
So
Murder on the Orient Express tonight. Isn't there a new Murder on the Orient Express?
I was literally thinking when you said Murder on the Orient Express, I was like, I have heard that. I was like, why have I heard that? It's like, oh yeah, 'cause it's a movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like,
Oh, there's one from
um,
2017. Um, that was the most recent one.
I'm gonna Google something real quick. Most selling female author of all time.
Are you fact checking me?
It's just like wait, let's do most selling author of all time.
There's a list on Wikipedia.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's still no matter what Agatha Christie.
Thank you. I know I'm right. I looked it up.
Although I guess I see the point of like it's just too close to tell. But like, how would you? So Shakespeare is from like the late 1500s. How on
Hmm.
earth would you have any
You
idea
just
how much
can't.
he
I
sold?
know. Because I remember like this, like I remember one time there was something where like Katy Perry has sold more records than the Beatles. And people were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." But you're like, "Yeah, because buying a Beatles record involved like getting up and going to the store, and like however they did that. And then like the Katy Perry stuff, you could just download it and that counts to those numbers. So it's just like things are more accessible now. So I don't know how you quantify William Shakespeare's books, but I feel like you quantify someone's books today, but that's like, I don't know, different, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. It's a totally different ball. Wait, R.L. Stein sold more than Stephen King? That can't be
That
right.
totally makes sense too, because he sells books to kids and they're shorter and you can buy them in Scholastic Book Fair. So if I'm going to this Classic Book Fair, I'm going to buy 6 R.L. Stein books, you know?
I was obsessed with R.L. Stein. So I when I was a kid, I had like this like a sheet of paper that I wrote down every R.L. Stein book I read, and it was like I
Mhm.
think I got one summer like or in one year like 150 something books in. And it was
See,
just
that's
like
that's what I mean. That's
R.L.
exactly right.
Stein.
I have a Trello board of all of Stephen King's works. It's public if anybody wants to look at it.
Wow, the 50 Shades of Grey lady is up there.
Hmm.
Anyways, now I'm just like looking up Ian Fleming. She sold as much as Ian Fleming.
Yeah, that makes sense. Put
Like,
it all into context of who's reading these books, you know?
well, it's different though because Ian Fleming had like a 50, 60 year head start on her,
Right, but like it takes nothing to be like, oh, I'm gonna read 50 Shades of Grey.
I guess. I never read that particular
I
book.
did not either, but I know I get it. I know what it's about.
I understand.
Yeah.
Um, Sweet. Well, thanks for sharing, Taylor. Very fun. Do you have any listener mail for your episode?
Actually, I have a bunch and it's all for you. I have a bunch of suggestions for you. I sent you that email from Kiara. I have more from someone Nadine sent me on Instagram. And then my friend Morgan, who I talked about last episode, she also sent me, she knows someone who climbed Mount Everest and she sent me a bunch of information about them. And I want to send it to you for you to read and report back on. So,
I would love that. Wait, is
yeah,
this somebody that she knows enough that I can actually talk to?
I don't know if they survived. I did not read everything. So they were in an avalanche. I don't know the details. I'm going to send it to you.
Okay.
You can figure it out. But yeah, so yeah, thank you
We
everyone. We got a lot of
we
responses to the last week, which was super fun, and we got a lot of suggestions, and thank you.
yeah, we love getting that feedback. It's so
So
awesome.
cool. So cool.
So yeah, please do write to us, doomtofellpod@gmail.com. The social medias at doomtofellpod. We're always eager to get your feedback. So please let us know.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you all so much.